Melissa told me while I was still cutting roast chicken at the kitchen island, like she was mentioning a change in the weather. Chloe wants Derek to escort her at the graduation banquet. The knife stopped in my hand. For a second, all I heard was the soft hum of the refrigerator and the ticking clock over the stove. Sunday evening. Rain tapping against the windows. A pan of potatoes cooling on the counter because dinner had gone quiet too fast. I looked up at her. Derek. She leaned against the sink, arms folded, already defensive. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Ethan. Chloe just feels more comfortable with him there. More comfortable. I repeated that in my head while staring at the woman I had spent 23 years trying to understand. Derek, the longtime family friend. The man who had somehow been present for too many birthdays, too many holidays, too many strange absences that never quite added up. The man Melissa always had an explanation for. And now my daughter wanted him walking beside her at the one table I had quietly built with my own money. I set the knife down carefully. I paid for the banquet. Melissa's jaw tightened. This isn't about money. Of course it was not about money to the people spending mine. I had booked the venue in February, paid the deposit the same day, covered the private dining room, the photographer, the hotel block for relatives coming in from Grand Rapids and Toledo, the floral package Chloe wanted because she said white roses looked more elegant in pictures. Last week, I bought her graduation gift too, a slim gold bracelet with her initials engraved inside. I had it wrapped in dark blue paper and hidden in the top drawer of my dresser, not because anyone asked me to, because fathers do things quietly when they believe they still belong in the room. When was she going to tell me? I asked. Melissa picked at a water ring on the counter. She didn't want a scene. That almost made me laugh. Not because it was funny, because it was precise. They had already written my role for me. The hurt man, the difficult man, the one whose presence had to be managed while everyone else made decisions around him. Chloe came a minute later, phone in hand, smiling at something on the screen, and stopped when she saw our faces. What? Melissa answered for me. I told him. Chloe exhaled, annoyed more than nervous. Dad, it's not personal. That was the cleanest cut of all. Not personal. Just my money, my planning, my place at the table, my years. None of that personal enough to matter. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw how easy this had become for both of them. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, dinner went cold between us. I said nothing, and that silence landed heavier than any argument I could have made. I didn't answer either of them. Chloe shifted her weight like she was waiting for me to object, maybe even hoping I would, because anger would have made this easier for all of them. Melissa kept that tight look on her face, the one she wore when she had already decided I was unreasonable before I opened my mouth. So I picked up my plate, scraped the untouched food into the trash, rinsed the dish, and set it in the rack. No slam cabinet, no raised voice, no speech about loyalty or gratitude, just the sound of running water and silverware touching ceramic. Behind me, Chloe muttered, "See? This is why I didn't want to tell him myself." I dried my hands on the dish towel and walked out of the kitchen before I said something that would still be echoing a year from now. My workshop sat behind the house, 30 feet from the back porch, a separate building with cedar siding and a warped step I always meant to fix. I crossed the wet grass in the dark with the porch light, throwing a weak yellow circle behind me. The air smelled like rain and sawdust. Inside, it was cool and familiar. Clean bench, pegboard wall, old radio in the corner, the place where things still made sense when people didn't. I turned on the lamp over my work table and pulled the gray metal file box from the lower shelf. Everything for Chloe's graduation weekend was in there. Contracts clipped together, payment confirmations, venue deposit, catering invoice, hotel room block, photographer retainer, floral order. Even the receipt for the bracelet was folded neatly inside a bank envelope. I laid every piece of paper out in rows, straightening corners with the side of my hand. I studied them one by one, not because I had forgotten what I paid, but because I wanted to see it clearly, to remove emotion from it, to reduce the whole insult to ink, numbers, dates, signatures. March 3rd, transfer to Lakeshore Banquet Hall. March 18th, deposit to Holland Suites for 12 rooms. April 2nd, final menu confirmation. April 9th, photographer balance due. I sat down on the stool and listened to rain tapping the workshop roof while the truth settled into place. I had funded a celebration. I was no longer welcome to fully attend. Not directly. Maybe they would still let me show up, sit somewhere, smile in photos if needed, but not as her father in the moment that mattered. That part had been handed to Derek, used when needed, moved aside when inconvenient. I looked at the papers for a long time, then stacked them carefully again. That was the moment I made the decision. Not in anger, not in heartbreak, in clarity. I would not keep paying for a place in a life that treated me like an optional detail. I didn't go back into the house that night. I stayed in the workshop until the rain stopped, until the silence outside matched the silence I had already decided to keep inside. Around 11:40 p.m., I turned on my laptop. The screen lit up the table, casting hard light over the neat stacks of receipts. My email inbox opened exactly where I left it earlier that day. Confirmations, reminders, polite messages from people who assumed I was still part of something. I started with the hotel. Subject line, reservation block, adjustment request. My fingers moved steadily, no hesitation. Please cancel all reserved rooms under my name for the graduation weekend. Effective immediately. I read it once. Removed one unnecessary word. Sent it. No explanation. The confirmation came back 8 minutes later. Your reservation block has been released. Just like that. Next was a photographer. He had been the most excited. Sent me sample shots. Talked about lighting angles near the waterfront. Said graduation events were his favorite because you can feel the pride in every frame. I stared at his invoice for a few seconds before opening a new message. Canceling services for May 22nd. Do not attend. Deposit forfeited if necessary. I didn't ask for the money back. This wasn't about recovering anything. It was about removing myself completely. Send. Then the florist. Then the catering coordinator. Each message shorter than the last. Clean. Direct. Final. No emotion leaking through the words. By 12:26 a.m., most of the structure I had built was already gone. What surprised me wasn't how difficult it was. It was how simple it felt, like pulling pins from something that had only been standing. Because I kept holding it up, I leaned back in the chair and opened the final contact. Lakeshore Banquet Hall, the center of it all, the place Chloe had spent an hour choosing, because she liked how the windows faced the water at sunset. The place Melissa said felt right when we toured together. I remember that day clearly. Melissa smiling, Chloe taking photos, me standing slightly behind them, already calculating costs in my head, already committing without saying it out loud. I typed slowly this time. Effective immediately, I am withdrawing all financial and contractual involvement from the graduation banquet scheduled under my name. Please release any remaining obligations tied to me. I paused, then added one more line. Do not contact me regarding further arrangements. Send. The room felt quieter after that. Not heavier. Quieter. I closed the laptop, stacked the papers back into the metal box, and slid it onto the shelf. Inside the house, they were probably still awake. Maybe talking about me. Maybe not. Maybe already assuming I would cool off by morning and step back into place. That was the part they didn't understand. I wasn't stepping away to make a point. I had already stepped out. I started packing before sunrise. Not everything. Just enough to make it clear, to myself more than anyone else, that I wasn't staying. The house was quiet in that heavy, early morning way. No voices. No footsteps. Just a low hum of the furnace and the occasional creak in the floorboards as it settled. I moved through it slowly, pulling a duffel bag from the closet, folding clothes without thinking too much about what I chose. Shirts first, jeans, a jacket, practical things. No hesitation. When I opened the dresser drawer, my hand paused for a second over the small blue box. Chloe's bracelet, still wrapped, still waiting. I stared at it longer than I should have, then closed the drawer without touching it. Some things didn't need to come with me. I carried the bag downstairs and sat by the door, then walked back toward the hallway closet where I kept older things, documents, files, things that hadn't mattered in years. At least, that's what I used to think. The notebook was still there. Black cover, worn edges, no label. I hadn't opened it in a long time. I took it into the living room, sat down, and flipped it open. The first page was dated 9 years ago. Short entries, observations, times, places. Melissa late again. Said work dinner. No details. Derek mentioned casually. 2, casually. Phone turned face down when I walked in. I turned the page. More of the same. Patterns I had noticed but never fully confronted. Small inconsistencies that, on their own, meant nothing, but together built something I chose not to name back then. I remember why. Because naming it would have required action, and action would have changed everything. So I documented instead. Quietly, carefully, like a man preparing for something he wasn't ready to face yet. Halfway through the notebook, the tone changed. Less questions, more certainty. Hotel receipt, found in car. Call at 11:47 p.m. whispering. Confirm, Derek. I stopped there. The word sat on the page like it had been waiting for me to come back, and read it again. Confirmed. I closed my eyes for a moment, not out of pain, but recognition. This wasn't new. None of it was. What happened last night wasn't betrayal. It was exposure. I had seen it years ago and chosen to stay. That part was on me. I flipped to the back of the notebook. The last few pages were different. No observations. Just planning. Numbers. Notes. Locations. One entry stood out. Property secured. Northern Michigan. Under trust. I leaned back slightly, reading it again. Months ago, I had already made a move. A small lakeside place. Quiet. Remote. Paid through a private trust tied to an account Melissa never had access to. I told myself at the time it was an investment, a retreat, somewhere to go someday. That wasn't true. It was an exit, one I built before I fully admitted I might need it. I closed the notebook and set it on the table. For a long time, I sat there in silence. The early light started to come through the windows. They thought last night changed everything. It didn't. It just made the next step obvious. By the time Melissa came downstairs, I was already sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of black coffee. Same place, same posture, same quiet, like nothing had changed. She hesitated when she saw me, probably expecting distance, tension, something visible she could react to. But I just took another sip and looked at the condensation sliding down the glass of water beside me. "Are you going to talk about last night?" she asked. I shrugged slightly. "There's nothing to discuss." That answer disarmed her more than anger would have. Melissa frowned. "You're just okay with it?" I didn't respond immediately. I let the silence stretch just long enough to make her uncomfortable. "I understand," I said finally. That wasn't the truth she expected. Upstairs, I heard Chloe moving around. Closet doors, drawers, the soft rhythm of someone getting ready for a day that still revolved around them. Normal. Untouched. That was the part they both believed. That this was just another moment I would absorb. Another situation where I would just quietly and keep everything running underneath them. Melissa sat across from me. "She didn't mean to hurt you." I nodded once. "I know." And I did. That didn't change anything. Chloe came down 10 minutes later, dressed casually. Phone already in her hand. She glanced at me, measuring the room. "Morning." "Morning," I said. No tension in my voice. No edge. That made her relax. Big mistake. She poured herself coffee, leaned against the counter, and started scrolling. Then she smiled slightly. "Derek already booked his tux," she said, almost casually. "He said he wants everything to look right for pictures." I watched her for a second, the ease in her voice, the assumption that I was just background now. "That's good," I said. Melissa glanced at me again, confused now. She was trying to find the reaction she had prepared for, the argument, the resistance, something she could push against. Instead, there was nothing. And people don't know what to do with nothing. Chloe turned her phone toward Melissa. Look, he found a place near the marina. Says it'll match the whole vibe. Melissa leaned over, smiling. That's perfect. They stood there together, discussing details of an event I had already erased. But they didn't know that yet. To them, everything was still intact, still funded, still waiting for me to step back in and carry it across the finish line. Chloe laughed softly. Honestly, this is going to be such a good night. I took another sip of coffee and stood up, calm, steady. I'm sure it will be, I said, and I meant it, just not in the way they thought, because what they were building now was already collapsing. It started before noon. I was already on the road by then, 2 hours out, heading north with my phone on silent in the passenger seat. The sky had cleared overnight, leaving everything sharp and quiet, like the world had reset without asking anyone. The first call came at 10:14 a.m. I didn't answer. Then another, then Melissa, then Chloe, then a number I recognized, Lakeshore Banquet Hall. I let all of them ring. By the time I stopped for gas, the screen was filled with notifications. Missed calls stacked on top of each other. Messages coming in faster than I cared to read. I opened one. Melissa, Ethan called me. Something's wrong with the venue. I locked the phone again and went inside to pay. Back in the car, I checked another. Chloe this time. Dad, what did you do? They're saying the account is flagged? I read that one twice. Not because I needed to, because I wanted to understand how quickly confusion turns into panic. I started the engine and pulled back onto the road. Another message came through almost immediately. This one longer. Melissa again. The coordinator says there's no active booking under your name anymore. They're asking for payment again. Ethan, this isn't funny. Funny. I kept driving. A few miles later, more messages. Different tone now. Less control. The photographer just canceled. Why are the hotel reservations gone? My sister just called me. They told her there's nothing under our name. Call me now. I imagined the scene without needing to see it. Melissa pacing in the kitchen, phone pressed tight to her ear, trying to hold authority in a situation she didn't understand anymore. Chloe refreshing emails, messaging vendors, voice getting sharper with every unanswered question. Everything they assumed was stable, shifting underneath them. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, like something being removed piece by piece. At 11:32, a new message came in. Unknown number. I opened it. Hi, this is Jenna from Lakeshore. We were informed you withdrawn from the event. The client is requesting clarification. Please confirm how you'd like us to proceed. I stared at it for a moment, then typed back, no further involvement. Direct all responsibility to them. Send. That was the last message I replied to. By noon, my phone was vibrating nonstop. Calls, texts, voicemails. I didn't listen to a single one. The road stretched out ahead of me, empty and steady, lined with trees just starting to turn green again. Behind me, their perfect celebration was coming apart. Not because of an accident, not because of bad luck, because every piece of it had been built on me staying exactly where they left me. And I didn't. By the time the first guest arrived, nothing was ready. I didn't need to be there to see it. I could picture it clearly. The parking lot half full, cars pulling in slowly, people stepping out dressed for a formal evening, pressed shirts, dresses, polished shoes, looking toward a building that wasn't prepared to receive them. Inside, staff moving without direction, no finalized seating, no confirmed catering, no timeline, because there was no longer a plan, only fragments of one. My phone buzzed again on the passenger seat. I glanced at it briefly this time. A voicemail from Melissa. I played it. Her voice wasn't controlled anymore. Ethan, you need to fix this. People are already here. My brother is asking questions. Chloe is. Just call me back. This has gone too far. I deleted it without saving. Another message came in while the silence settled again. Chloe, they're saying there's no food order. None. What is wrong with you? I didn't answer. Somewhere behind me, the situation kept escalating. Relatives arriving from out of town, confused, irritated, checking confirmations that no longer meant anything. Conversations turning sharp. Fingers pointing, but no one having a clear answer, because the one person who had built it was gone. Then at 4:17 p.m., a new message appeared. Short, different, from Chloe. Derek just canceled. I slowed the car slightly, not because I had to, but because I wanted to read that again. Another message followed immediately. He says this is too much pressure, and he doesn't want to be involved anymore. I could almost hear the shift. Not just panic now. Collapse. The one person she had chosen over me was stepping back the moment things stopped being easy. No responsibility. No weight. Just attention until it required more. Another message. This one longer. He said he didn't sign up for all this chaos. He thought it was just dinner. Of course he did, because he was never meant to carry anything real. That was my role. And they handed it to someone who had never even tried to understand it. I pulled over briefly, engine still running, and looked out at the empty stretch of road ahead. For the first time that day, I allowed myself a slow breath, not satisfaction, not anger, just clarity settling into place. Behind me, everything was unraveling in front of witnesses. Family, friends, people who had seen the invitations, who had heard the plans, who were now watching it fall apart without explanation. And right at the center of it, Chloe, standing there without the man she chose and without the one she replaced. It didn't stay contained. Things like that never do. By early evening, the story had already started slipping out of the room. First in whispers, then in messages, then in posts that didn't say everything directly but said enough. I saw the first one when I stopped near a rest area, more out of habit than curiosity. A notification. Tagged photo. I opened it. Chloe, standing near the entrance of the venue, dressed perfect, makeup untouched, smile strained in a way only people who knew her would recognize. Around her, a few relatives stood too stiff, too aware of something being wrong. The caption was simple. Not the night we expected. I scrolled. Comments already building underneath. What happened? Why does it look empty? Where's her dad? That one appeared more than once. Where's her dad? I locked the screen, then unlocked it again a few seconds later. Another post. This time from her cousin, Mark. Less careful. Wild how you replaced the man who raised you with your mom's friend, and then everything falls apart. Karma hits fast. No names. Didn't need them. The replies came in fast. What? Wait, what friend? Are you serious right now? I stare at the screen, watching it unfold in real time. Years of quiet tension, unanswered questions, things people noticed but never said out loud. Now they had a shape, a direction, and once people start connecting dots, they don't stop. More posts, more speculation. Someone mentioned Derek by name. Someone else replied with, "Wasn't he always around?" Another, "This has been going on for years, hasn't it?" I set the phone down on the passenger seat and leaned back, looking up through the windshield at the fading sky. No statement from me. No explanation. That was the part that made it heavier. Because silence doesn't stop a story. It forces other people to tell it. And they were. Back at the venue, I imagined the shift. Phones coming out. Whispers turning into open conversations. People looking at Melissa differently. At Chloe. At Derek, who wasn't even there anymore. The narrative forming without me saying a word. Not shaped by anger. Not controlled. Just exposed. My phone buzzed again. Chloe. I let it ring once. Twice. Then it stopped. A message came through. Please just tell me why you did this. I read it, then set the phone face down. Because the truth was simple. I didn't do anything to them. I just stopped protecting them from it. By the time the noise reached its peak, I was already gone. Not just from the house. From all of it. The road narrowed as I drove deeper north. Trees closing in on both sides. The air changing. Cooler, cleaner, quieter. No notifications out here. No constant vibration in my pocket. Just the sound of tires against asphalt and the occasional break of wind through the trees. I turned onto a gravel path just before sunset. The tires crunched slowly as the lake came into view. Flat. Still untouched. The kind of water that doesn't reflect chaos, only light. The cabin sat exactly where I remembered. Small, clean, separate, mine. I parked, stepped out, and stood there for a moment without moving. No voices, no expectations, no one waiting for an answer. Just silence. The good kind. Inside, everything was already set the way I left it months ago. Basic furniture. A worn couch. A wooden table near the window. I dropped my bag by the door and walked straight through to the back deck. The lake stretched out in front of me. Catching the last light of the day, I sat down. For the first time in a long time, there was nothing to manage, no role to play, no tension sitting just beneath normal conversation. I reached into my pocket, took out my phone, and turned it on. Signal came back slowly. Then everything hit at once. Messages, missed calls, notifications stacked so high they blurred together. Melissa, Chloe, unknown numbers, even a few from people I hadn't heard from in years. I didn't open any of them. Instead, I switched the camera, walked down to the edge of the dock, cast a line into the water, waited. The surface barely moved. The air carried that quiet stillness you only get away from everything else. A few minutes later, the line pulled. Nothing dramatic, just steady. I reeled it in, slow and controlled, until the fish broke the surface, flashing silver in the fading light. I held it up for a second, not for anyone else, just to see it. Then I set the phone on a post, angled it, and took one photo. No caption, no explanation, just me standing on the dock, holding something simple, real, earned. I released the fish back into the water and watched it disappear. When I checked the phone again, the photo had already uploaded. No words attached. That was enough. Because while everything back there was still burning, I was no longer in it. It took her 3 weeks to find me. I knew she would. Not because she understood anything, but because when everything else collapses, people go back to the last place that felt stable. For her, that had always been me. I was at the lumber yard just off the highway, loading planks into the back of my truck, when I saw her. She stood near the entrance for a moment before walking in, like she wasn't sure she belonged there. No dress this time. No makeup done for photos. Just jeans, a hoodie, hair pulled back tight. Smaller, quieter, real, Dad. I didn't answer right away. I adjusted the stack of wood, checked the straps, made sure everything was secure. Then I looked at her. You found it. She nodded, swallowing hard. I had to ask around. Of course she did. Truth travels slower when you're chasing it. I'm sorry, she said quickly. Too quickly, like she had practiced it. I know I messed up. I didn't understand what was happening. Mom told me things, and I thought. I raised a hand slightly. She stopped. Silence settled between us, heavier than anything she was trying to say. I thought, Derek. I thought he was just. She struggled, shaking her head. I didn't know everything. That's not true, I said calmly. Her face tightened. You knew enough, I continued. You just chose what was easier. Her eyes dropped. I stepped closer. Not aggressive, not emotional, just steady. You didn't replace me in one moment, Chloe. I said. That decision started a long time before the banquet. She wiped her face quickly. I didn't think you'd leave. That was honest. And that was the problem. I know, I said. We stood there for a few seconds, the sounds of forklifts and distant machinery filling the space where something else used to exist between us. I just want to fix it, she said quietly. I nodded once, then shook my head. You can't. That landed, not loudly, but completely. I'm still your father. I added, voice even. That doesn't change. She looked up, a flicker of hope. I ended it before it could grow. But the version of me that stayed where I wasn't respected, I said, that part's gone. Her shoulders dropped. No argument left. No version of this where she could go back. I turned, climbed into the truck, and started the engine. She didn't move, didn't try to stop me, just stood there, holding the weight of something she finally understood. Too late to change it. I pulled out slowly, not looking back. Because some things don't end with anger. They end with clarity. And once you see everything for what it is, you don't return.